unfortunately, once the light comes on and you start flying the D, you realize that there should be literally to this day there should be 300 of them out there right now.
It was 100%. Yeah. 100%.
It was absolutely the most lethal aircraft that CAG-8 had on the flight deck.
Scott, cruise. You can replay that every few seconds because our audience will love that.
So. That's right. On the flight deck, crews are now manning for the next launch. It's time to clear the flight deck and catwalks. Stand well clear of all jet blasts, prop arcs, and exhaust. It's time to start up the Go aircraft. Let's start them up.
I'm Dave Baronic, call sign Bio. I was an F-14 Rio and Top Gun instructor, and I'm one of your hosts for the F-14 Tomcast. The U.S. Navy retired the F-14 Tomcat in 2006, and of course, there had to be a last Tomcat Squadron CO. We talked to him today about what it was like turning off the lights in the last Tomcat ready room.
And I'm Craig Snyder, call sign Crunch. I was an F-14 pilot, also a Top Gun instructor, and I'm your other host here on the F-14 Tomcast. Our guest today is former F-14 pilot and retired commander Jim call sign Puck Howe. He was the last commanding officer of Fighter Squadron 31, the Tomcatters, the very last of the fighter squadrons. He's here today to talk to us about the highlights of the sunset and the sundown of the F-14 community, and he has some great stories for us today. So welcome, Puck. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, guys. Bio Crunch, excited. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Well, it's great having you here. So Puck, let's get started. Well, hopefully nobody can hear my dogs barking in the background here, but hey, so Puck, tell us let's get started with the basics. We always like to ask our guests where everybody's from, their background, where are you from, how you got commissioned, how you got into naval aviation, and how did you get into F-14s?
Well, my family's originally from Pittsburgh, but we moved around a lot. My dad was an executive with a steel company, appropriately enough. And I went to a couple high schools, but graduated from high school in Iowa. And when I was in high school, you may have seen the movie The Right Stuff that came out. And I thought that was about the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And so I was like, I want to be an astronaut. I think that'll be a ton of fun. Did a little research and found that the Naval Academy was, and I will say still is, the number one source for the astronauts in our program. So I worked hard to try to get into Annapolis. I was fortunate enough to gain entrance to the academy. And so in 1985, I headed off to the Naval Academy with the goal of someday flying fighters and being an astronaut.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you got into, so you just picked fighters. You were number one in the class or something like that. Yours is a boring story of success, right?
It was, obviously it was competitive, as you guys know, but anyone who goes to Pensacola, I think, my roommate wanted P3s. He was a P3 guy. His dad was a P3 guy, but that never appealed to me. Flying off a carrier was what I really wanted to do. Yeah. And it was while I was flying off carriers that my goals about being an astronaut changed, because the life of a test pilot wasn't the way it was during the Right Stuff days. And what I found out was that the best pilots that we had in the Navy were Top Gun guys. So that's when I changed my goals and decided that Top Gun was the route I wanted to go.
That's right. Yeah. And you went through the class in, if I remember right, like about 96.
97.
97. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was one of the first classes that went in the SFTI program that after we'd moved from Miramar, I did the ground school when I was a JO in 32 with you, Crunch.
Yep.
Went and served coffee in the back of the room while Bear and Smut went through the course and had a great time. But, that wasn't my turn. So I waited a year and a half and then went out in 97. But Top Gun had just moved, which is a shame because that beautiful building they had in Miramar. And so we were one of the first few classes to go through after it moved to Fallon. And ironically, we ended up doing our 1v1 dead out in Miramar. So we got back in the old Top Gun spaces anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool. So now I know that you and I were in VF-32 together. Yep. My first cruise, your second cruise. But how about aside from that, what squadrons were you in? You're VF-32 and then what?
I went from VF-32. I was a RAG instructor at VF-101 for 3 years. And if you remember, my pilots of my generation, the 89-90 group, we were very delayed going through flight school.
Yeah.
I had a 6-month wait to start T2s. I had a 6-month wait to start A4s. I had a year wait to start F-14 training at Oceana. I was stashed at Fighter Wing 1 in the ready room there. So I ended up starting VF-101 as a Cat 1 as a frock lieutenant. And I was not alone. All the guys that were 89 or 90 were in the same boat. So as a result, I never got a Super JO tour. I went straight from being a RAG instructor to a baby department head in VF2.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So I did a 3-year tour there, and I did all 4 departments. I was admin, I was safety, admin, ops, and maintenance, which was great because it was an awesome squadron. I worked for some of the best skippers I ever had there, and I went from.
I should have worn my VF2 shirt today then. Okay.
Wow, the bullets. It was a great squadron. It was a big squadron too. We had 12 04s. So I mean, yeah.
Holy cow!
It was.
That's like the days. That's like the early days that Streak and Lur were telling us about way back in our second episode.
Yeah, and we had Tool Parrish and Booger Berger were our CO and XO, and talk about 2 great humans. But
okay, quick note about Booger because he came through the Top Gun class when I was already an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting there watching his performance, which was incredible. And I'm going like, man, I'm glad I'm already here because there's not that many Rio slots and he is good.
Yeah, as you know, and he went to the staff after that. So Booger and Tip O'Dowd was my roommate for both deployments. So Tip was an old Top Gun bro. And, we're still close friends to this day. But I did 2 deployments with VF2, and then I went from VF2. I was the OPSO at the Strike Fighter Weapons School in Oceana. And that's just as they were merging the old SWAT slant and SFIZL. So they were merging the 2. So the Tomcats and Hornets were coming together. We ended up with 3 OPSOs at one point. And this is when Argo was the CO. And they're like, all right, we got to puck. This is not, we didn't send here to compete. We want to pull you out. So I ended up going to Newport from there. And when I was at Newport, I was selected to originally be the VF8 or VF-213 XO. And I was going to take 213 out to Lemoore in the transition, but that ended up changing with the slate. So then I ended up at 31.
There it is. All right.
It's amazing that you mentioned those details because, I was going to ask you about, I mean, we'll get to this other question I'm going to ask, but I was going to ask you about being the last Tomcat CO. And it's like, it's the finger of fate, the wheel of fortune, whatever. You were planning to go to another squadron and then things change. I mean, I think that's interesting for our audience about how things change like that, because over the years, there's just been a lot of guys who were scheduled to go one place and then something happened. Somebody got in a car accident, somebody got in trouble or whatever, and they have to reshuffle the assignments and it just changes their lives.
It did. It was a quirk of fate. Actually, what they ended up doing was 213 was supposed to, the 31 was supposed to go out to the West Coast and pick up Fs. And the Redcocks were going to come from Lemoore and pick up Es. So, and 31 had been through the ringer. They'd done a lot of deployments in the last few years. And the CO, my CO, Rick LaBranch, had made a very compelling argument. He's like, why don't you just leave 31 here? We'll pick up Es, leave the Redcocks in Lemoore, and they'll pick up Fs. That way you don't trans-country both squadrons and all their people and everything else. And DC actually said, yeah, that's a good idea. So that's how
we listened to a good idea.
They listened to a good idea.
I'm writing that down.
Right. Yeah, so I was supposed to be.
I'm not sure I believe that. Let's get Twig on the phone. Let's call him in.
Well, and that's how, because Tip O'Dowd was supposed to go to 31, but obviously once they go Es, there isn't a seat for him. He's a Rio. And so they're like, okay. And so I switched with Tip.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I mean, you had a very good operational career. You did a lot of great flying, even though it was delayed at the start.
Yeah.
How well prepared did you feel for being a Tomcat squadron skipper?
I felt very prepared. I can honestly say I never had a bad commanding officer. I was fortunate. In 32, I had Kerry Silver's Dollar, and I had Kenny Floyd Pink, who were two of my favorite humans. And then I was at VF-101, which is, it's a who's who of great instructors. I mean, at that point, we just shut Miramar down, so all the West Coast guys had come over to Oceana, of course, unwillingly. But, we were all single site. I know. And I get it. Flying out there was pretty spectacular. But, VF-101 we had 55 F-14s. We had 900 people. It was quite an operation. And, we had great 04s. I had Hack McMasters, talking about some Top Gun guys. Hack was my OPSO. Paul Haas Butkus was my assistant OPSO. So these are the guys that trained me. As a matter of fact, Hack was the one that put me through a little program to get me ready for Top Gun. He's like, I wasn't flying much as a RAG instructor. I'd just come back from deployment with 32. I'd been off for a while. He's like, hey, we got to get you ready. So he gave me a 2-week course with me and my Rio, who I'd never flown with. It wasn't like the days where two squadron mates went. He was coming from a different squadron. And Abdul and I got to fly together before we went out. And it really helped a lot because we were ready when we went out there. But I was absolutely prepared to be a CO because, after my RAG experience, being at VF2 with Tool and Booger, and then Slim Whitson was there at the end, and then working for Argo at the weapons school, I had nothing but great examples on what really needed to be happening in order to operate a squadron. As Kelly Booger used to tell me, he's like, Puck, I've done your job. If you want me to do it again, I will. And so when I was his OPSO and his maintenance officer, I worked very hard to make sure he didn't need to do my job.
I've heard that one before. I've had your job. I don't need to do
the maintenance officer, and I can do it again if you'd like.
I have to say, I'm pretty sure Slave Boy told me that one time too.
Slave Boy was my next door roommate when we were XOs together, so we'd share many a story.
That's right, because that's when I was in when you were XO at 31. I was a department head at 213 at the time on that last deployment.
Yeah.
So let's talk about.
I knew you guys had some overlap. So Crunch.
Yeah.
Thanks for
we've been overlapping for a long time here now.
Long time.
Yeah, he probably owes me money. I don't know.
I do.
But maybe I owe you money. Who knows?
Probably.
But yeah, so let's talk about that last deployment a little bit. So that last deployment, you were the XO. I was the maintenance officer in 213. You were the XO of 31.
Yep.
And I mean, let's be honest. We had there was a little bit of competition. It was healthy. I liked it. And you guys were the 100 series. We were the 200 series. And we had two Hornet squadrons, two C model Hornet squadrons. And we were out there when we got on station flying Iraq. We were flying every single day that we weren't pier side. And the tempo was so stinking fast. I remember my experience. Can you talk?
So what year was that? What kind of ops were they? Was it OIF?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 2000.
Yeah. We were flying missions in Mosul.
Dropping bombs and everything, combat missions.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's amazing. Okay. So go ahead. Crunch, you were going to launch into a story.
I was just going to say so Puck, I remember some of that. Can you talk through some of the stories that you remember? Let's just throw some stories around from that last one.
Sure.
I think it's kind of amazing, that last deployment.
Yeah, it was busy, as you remember. We had a great CAG. We had Bill Sizemore and Dan Dixon, who's one of my favorite humans in the world. I will say this. I'll brag on Dix, another Top Gun instructor, by the way. But I think Dix is the best Tomcat driving Hornet baby. That guy could really fly a Tomcat well. And for a kid that, a guy that didn't grow up flying it, being a Hornet baby, he understood how to fly the big fighter, which, as you understand, was a unique skill set. As I like to say, the rudder pedals in a Tomcat are rudder pedals in a Hornet, they're brakes. And, for taxiing. Yep. Most of the guys don't understand what they are, but Dix absolutely did. And he flew a really good Tomcat. Yeah, he was. Yeah. But working for those guys was great. We were very busy. And it was a healthy competition. As you know, Twig, I was XO, Twig was the CO. Twig is a very A personality in an A personality room. There can be a lot of.
You don't say.
Yeah. So it was always fun. And, XO and CO are supposed to be a yin and yang. We just had two alphas in the room all the time. And I will say, I think one of the things that really helped us is, we had two drivers. One of the things I think may have hurt you a little, Crunch, was that you had great Rios, but you had Rio. So your senior drivers, you were probably the senior driver in your squadron.
At one point, Tom Wagner was the senior pilot.
Yeah.
If you remember Tom's call sign Zach.
Yeah, Zach's good people.
Yeah, great dude who just retired last month, if I remember right. But he was the senior pilot for a lot of it, and between the two of us, we were taking on a lot of that role in the squadron, where normally it'd be the front office, mentoring guys, bringing them along.
Yeah,
but sometimes that was left to us to be like, hey, Groner I was Groner's pilot, and he used to be like, hey, Crunch, you need to go talk to this guy over here.
And Groner's fantastic. I remember when Groner came to VF-101 after his first deployment. He was an A6 guy, and I remember he was an A6D base. A6s to F-14Ds, and he's going through Top Gun in an A. And I remember literally the week before we're sending him out to Top Gun, he's talking on the radio how to get an alignment in the plane, and I'm like, oh, he'll be back in a week. But to Groner's credit, he figured out how to work an AUG-9, and which I cannot imagine, having never been in the back of an F-14A and just having flown a D, and only, by the way, one deployment, and doing as well as he did out there. But so Groner was the XO when after Slave Boy took over, and
I should have given him my cell phone number so guys get in the line, they have problems, they could just call me up, because I get 2,500 hours in the A. I could have.
Yeah. And Bio, I agree, because my first 2,000 hours were in an A. As a matter of fact, I didn't even fly the D until I was a department head. I didn't fly it in the RAG because I didn't consider it a real F-14.
And then you get in and you're going like, and then you get in and you're going like, oh, man.
Yeah. Unfortunately, once the light comes on and you start flying the D, you realize that there should be, literally to this day, there should be 300 of them out there right now.
It was 100%. Yeah.
It was absolutely the most lethal aircraft that CAG-8 had on the flight deck.
Scott, you can replay that every few seconds because our audience will love that.
So. That's right. Yeah. So we had, that's a great point. So we had, golly, how many airplanes were in each squadron?
We had 11. We each had 11.
Was it 11?
F-14s. Yeah, we had one more than normal.
Okay.
The normal F-14 squadron, when there were two squadrons, had 10, but we had 11 because that's how many were left. Yeah. And I can also tell you that, Crunch, you deployed in F-14s before. And that was my 5th deployment in F-14s. Never do we have better F-14s. Not only were they Ds, but they were phenomenally maintained. We had
that's so true.
Yeah, Bio, if you can imagine, it's like Fighter Wing existed to provide us parts. We were the only squadrons left. So it's like, you need what? It's like, sure, we'll get it out. So everything worked on all 11 F-14s. They were all just pristine, war machines.
That's right.
Hardly imagine.
By the way, we'd be flying every single day. And so we would like, you would come back, you would shut down to download and upload ordnance, but then you'd get fired up again. Sometimes you would even hot switch into like these longer missions. And then you go blast off to a double tanker, triple tanker mission where you're flying 6, 7. I heard somebody did like an 8-hour mission. I
logged a 9-1 and a 9-4.
Oh my God, I never did one that long. My back hurts just thinking about it. Yeah. But you come back and you land, you boom, fire that thing up again, and as long as it's running, it's not breaking. And so I remember we had our cost per flight hour was lower than the brand new Super Hornets back at Oceana because we were generating so many flight hours every single day between both squadrons. It wasn't like, oh, it's my squadron because I was the maintenance officer.
It had nothing, honestly.
It had nothing to do with any of the assholes or any people like that.
Well, and Bio, as you can imagine, both squadrons were stacked. It was on the enlisted side. I mean, every wrench turner that had ever worked on an F-14, and they were as fiercely proud of flying F-14s and fixing F-14s as we were. Every one of them, they wanted to be in those last squadrons. So, I mean, we had great chiefs. Our goat locker was fantastic.
That's right.
Our enlisted kids were the best maintainers there were.
I don't want to cry, but in the late 90s, when we got 8 new senior enlisted, 6 of them had no F-14 experience.
Yeah.
And because nobody cared. I mean, it was just like, everybody was Hornet focused and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Bio, we had 15 chiefs and 13 of them had grown up in the F-14 community.
That's the way it ought to be. Incredible.
Well, and you had Joe Seabald as your maintenance master chief, one of my favorite humans. He was my maintenance master chief in VF2 back in the Bullets. But we had Mikey Wheeler. We didn't even have a master chief. We had an E8, Mikey Wheeler, and
who was in 32 with us.
Yeah, and Twig's like, listen, we can get an E9. I go, Mikey's an E9 to me. He's fantastic, and he was. We thought he was going to. He never picked up 9, which was a crime, but he certainly served as our maintenance master chief, and he was fantastic. We had the best wrench turners in the F-14 history.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. I remember that we even had a couple of things where sometimes you would have like that one airplane where, man, we couldn't figure it out. I remember we had one where there was a flight control thing, another where there was a fuel thing, and in previous cruises, that airplane probably would have been the Hangar Queen. It would have been the Can Bird where you cannibalize the heck out of it to keep everything flying. Not this time. We would send those things down to the hangar, and dudes would tear into them, fix them, and get them back on the flight schedule. So I just remember it being so stinking effective. It was just such a great deployment, great dudes, great sailors. I mean, it was just really, really good.
Yeah, no, it was a fortunate time in history, as I like to say. It was, and I do think that it was bittersweet in the sense that I think everyone realized how lethal the F-14 was, and that this was it. It didn't limp out by any stretch. It roared out and was absolutely the war machine of choice on the flight deck at that time.
Yeah. And we had switched from the old days of the strictly air to air to now we were almost strictly air to ground. I mean, we didn't have AIM 54 on that cruise.
No.
We had AIM 9 and AIM 7 for the air to air stuff. And we had nothing but air to ground ordnance. Not only, I mean, everybody was lantern. We had tarps. We had everybody going in doing airborne ISR. Where I remember you'd go up, hit the Martina track up in northern Iraq, and just go fly around Mosul for 4 hours, basically calling people on and trying to get helos in and out and stuff. It was just you're always doing something that was air to mud in support of the troops on the ground. And I mean, every time you get airborne, you go in, get up on J Voice, check in with Kingpin, and like, hey, I got a flight of 2 F-14Ds. Where do you want us? Boom. Off you go. And you're going to go off and hit that kill box over there and go to work. And I just remember being always worked. Oh, I mean, what a lethal combination. All those weapon systems we had. And then we had the goggles on there. We had those.
And the Erst. Don't forget the Erst. You haven't mentioned the Erst.
The Erst. That's right. We had Erst and all those.
I was an Erst king, man. I love that thing.
I tell you, there were so many systems available to us that were working on those airplanes that I swear sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I had this tool. I forgot I had that. I mean, holy
amazing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think having been mentioned here is one of the best missions that we had is that we would clear routes for our guys on the ground. The Lantern could find IEDs better than anything else out there. You could see a little hot spot on the road. I mean, you could tell miles away. And so we could stop convoys and go, hey, I think you've got an IED, 70 meters ahead on the right side of the road. And they'd send the robots out and they're like, yep, there it is. And so that was one of the more rewarding missions that we were able to do.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
Tomcats.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and the other thing was just the pure flight hours. I remember, I had 2 months. Was it 2 months over 90 hours and 2 months over 80 hours? I'm going to have to go look at my logbook.
That is a lot of flight hours.
It was amazing. I mean, as an airline pilot, you're like, yeah, whatever, 90 hours. That's just a normal month, whatever. But
maybe for a regional guy.
Yeah. Well, for for
a FedEx dude.
Yeah, all right. Well, for those of us at American Airlines, 85 hours, that's a month, right? But when you're flying F-14s, that's an awful lot of time because, oh, by the way, we don't have a coffee machine, we don't have a meal service, and we don't have a bathroom. And and if you do have a lot of piddle packs, and for those who aren't familiar, sometimes it can make a mess. It's obnoxious. That's a whole nother bio. We're going to have a story time where we talk about it, the mechanics of the piddle pack. But
especially in a dry suit crunch back in the 32 days.
Well, yes, because if you're wearing a dry suit, it's probably cold weather. And when there's cold weather, it's like a turtle, right? And so now you're trying to get that little guy, you're trying to get into the little into the Ziploc bag, and then it goes over and it gets on your hands. And now you're like, I got to put the bag down here. And then and you're like, oh my God, the next guy, Puck's getting in the airplane after me. And he's like, Crunch was just in here peeing on his hands. And now he's touching the seat.
I just screwed my mouth.
Yeah, my fingers.
We had a Rio who left piddle packs in the map case.
Oh,
you can train that out of them really quickly, though.
Yeah,
that's very easy to fix.
Oh my God!
That was. I'm not going to say what squadron it was in, but okay, never mind. Let's keep going.
Were you maybe the XO and CO of the squadron?
Was it me? No, I was the JO at the time.
Oh, okay. All right, gotcha.
we just thought it was funny. I mean, it was, it
is. Oh yeah.
Piddle pack. So
the piddle packs actually got better bio. So they went away from the cheese sandwiches and they started putting like Jello in there.
Well, and that's what we called them. We called them cheese sandwiches. And I actually,
that's what we called them. We grew up with cheese sandwiches too, but by the time we were in CAG 8, it was like those gel. And
it was crazy.
It really worked. It wasn't like the cheese sandwich, which was useless.
Now, the fun for everybody on YouTube, I'm going to bet money that Bio's got an old piddle pack on the bookshelf back there, don't you?
Oh, I got one.
Yeah, you should go grab it and show everybody.
I got one in my garage.
Oh, I don't know how you guys get these things.
Well, I just, you know how I got it? It's when they packed up my flight gear from VF-31 or VFA 31. And it's all in there.
It's a good point. If I go in my attic right now, there's probably a G suit up there with not only my an unused piddle pack, an approach plate. That's right.
Approach plates and a piddle pack.
Southeast United States from 2005. This might still be good.
Launch me.
Good enough.
Oh, man. I mean, the stories that you guys have told already already make this episode. This is why we do the F-14 Tomcast. One, we tell our guests, Puck, we tell you, don't sugarcoat it if there's bad things. But you guys were on that last deployment. It sounds like so many things were going your way, and the Tomcat community was behind you, supporting you. When you take resources that are designed to support 10 squadrons and you aim them at 2 squadrons,
that's it.
Yeah,
it's going to work out well.
Yep. Nail on the head.
And when what we had. That's exactly. And if you wanted a part, they found a part. There were parts laying around.
Remember how much the parts cost?
No, I don't.
They were a penny.
No, I don't remember that.
Everything was a penny.
I don't remember that.
Bio. That's what literally. So if you needed a torque tube for a flap, it was a penny. Everything
was trying to empty the stocks.
They're trying to empty the stocks, and everything had already been paid for. So they're like, okay, everything's a penny. So
that is awesome. Cost per flight hour even goes down. Everything else.
Yep.
Okay, right. So when did you get back from the deployment?
We got back in March of 2006.
Okay, because the reason I'm asking because the sunset was in September, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we got back in end of March of 2006. It might even have been the beginning of April.
And when was the change of command?
Change of command was in April. So as soon as we got back from deployment, VF-213, our sister squadron, went to VFA 106 to start learning how to fly Super Hornets.
Yep.
Gave away, at that point, they'd given away all their F-14s, and that's when we became the last F-14 squadron.
Was there any gamesmanship or discussion or argument about who's going to be the last Tomcat squadron? Do you remember any of that?
No, there wasn't, because it was all that had been decided on the slate. So between the two of us, we just supported each other as well as we could.
There was a lot of folks in VF-213 who were really unhappy that it wasn't them, and there was a belief that it was a grand conspiracy against VF-213 that VF-31 got it, but it was so above us.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. So it was, and I recognize it, and I'm sure most of the troops did too. So it was, so we came back. We had the change of command. 213 started training in the Super Hornet, and that's when we were the last F-14 squadron. So
every squadron that gets back, you're going to, your readiness goes down. You're not the alert squadron in case the world blows up and you have to launch. Did you
actually? We were.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Did they tell you?
We were still the surge. So we had to cover for 213. So we As a matter of fact, we were back on the carrier in June, requaling. So
that's right.
Amazing.
You guys
That's
had to
amazing.
go out and stay night current,
we had to
didn't
stay
you?
night current. So literally, a month after I took command, we were starting to bounce again. We stood everyone down, took some vacation,
Yes.
recharged the batteries a little, standard post-cruise stuff. But shortly after that, we had to get our minds right again. And we got rid of 2 of our planes. So we were down to 9 jets. And this is where we started sending them off to museums. I think of the 11 jets, 7 of them went to museums and 4 of them went out to Davis-Monthan. So,
Okay, so you're in the front office.
Yeah.
And you're managing this, circus show of delivering Tomcats to museums and stuff. Did you have a department head or somebody that you threw that off to, or your XO maybe, or did you?
Mostly maintenance. My Mo took care of most of that. So
Okay.
he'd call and
So
hey,
you were still able to be a CO.
Yeah, it was, and I didn't micromanage it. I handled it the way Booger kind of taught me. It's like, I've been a Mo. If you want me to be a maintenance officer again, I can. But, and I think it was either Chris Richard Limp or Charlie Brown, Scotty, who was another Top Gun bro. I think he was out there with you, wasn't he, Crunch?
He was. That's right.
Yeah. I forget which one was my Mo at this point. I think it was Scotty, but yeah. But whoever it was, they did a great job. It was, and my XO was interested because there was one plane that he was going to go to a museum near his hometown. And he's like, do you mind if I take it? I go, not at all. He's like, it's a 4,000-foot runway. I'm like, well, don't go off the end. And he didn't, it's like, it was approved by, Air Lance, like, yeah, you can do it. And we had to talk about it and brief it and land light and everything, but 4,000 feet, it's not a problem. And, so that's, I didn't have a whole lot of oversight on that because I didn't need to.
That's awesome.
No, that reminds me of when I, what was I? Oh, I think it was a skipper at the time. And we were delivering a plane to.
Who were you XO for, if you don't mind me asking?
Who, me? I was XO for JD Oliver, JR.
Okay.
And he was a West Coast pilot, and my XO was Coconut.
He's a FedEx guy.
He's a what?
JD.
Oh, yeah, JD.
Yeah, he just retired from FedEx.
Oh, FedEx. I'm sorry, I missed that. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. And then my XO was Coconut Cohort.
Oh, okay. Coconut's a great dude.
Yeah. And, but I went, we had to deliver a jet to the Northrop Grumman facility in St. Augustine. And as we took off from Oceana, as we're taking off, I'm trying to remember, we got a flap light or something like that. And my pilot goes, either the main flaps or the aux flaps retracted, or we had some kind of failure. And we go, we're taking it to, so we continued our flight, which was actually kind of fun. We flew over his father's cabin in the mountains, and we flew over my brother's house. At low altitude,
right?
Because we're going so then we go to land in St. Augustine, and we only had partial flaps. Yep. So, when you said a 4,000-foot runway, so he goes,
that wouldn't have worked on a 4,000-foot runway.
No, so they had like a 6,000 or 7,000 foot, I think.
Yeah.
I pull my NATOPS out and I check our landing speed and everything. And it's like, we rolled to like 2 feet from the end of the runway. The brakes were smoking and everything. It's like, just one more thing for them to fix, That's
right. Here are the keys. Bye.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm the skipper, so he didn't have to explain it to anybody. So it's
you didn't have to get any more approval. It's approved. Go.
Oh man.
Okay, where were we? Oh, you're in your last couple of months. I'm kind of amazed. I'm surprised that they still had you guys on standby and operational. But it makes sense.
Yeah, we had to cover it, and so we spent 2 weeks out at sea, and that was the last time that F-14s did cats and traps. By the end of it, we had, I think, over 50 reporters on the ship.
So now the media circus starts.
Yeah, and Crunch was there. The media circus actually started on cruise. The last deployment, it wasn't bad, but to be honest, Bio, I know the Hornet guys were sick of it because the Tomcat guys were getting sick of it. But the last this, the last that, this is the last combat mission, the last night. It's like, okay, it's starting to get a little old. And by the time we got to this final at sea period, it had worn thin for just about everybody. So I was honestly, as a CEO, the thing that you most frightened of is getting somebody hurt. And that's so I pulled all the guys into a room. I'm like, guys, listen, it's going to be 2 weeks. We're going to have a lot of eyes on us. I go, but I just want you guys to manage your own schedules, make sure you're ready. And the boat will always kill you if you don't give it all the respect it deserves. And they, I'm still proud of them because the only squadron that I was ever in bio that we didn't lose somebody was when I was CO in VF-31.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, and that's literally when I took over, the day I took over, that's what I said. I go, I just want to give all the jets and all the people that I took today over to Opie here in 18 months. And I'm proud to say we were able to do that.
That's interesting because when I think back to my 3 squadrons and 5 deployments, we didn't lose anyone when I was in the squadron. So I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, you're very fortunate. Yeah.
We lost jets, but no people.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, maybe it was bad luck.
Crunch, did you lose shipmates? Yeah, well, you probably did.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking I never lost anybody in the squadron. Certainly lost a bunch of airplanes though.
Yeah.
Hey,
you showed up to 32 after we'd already lost Biff and Moon.
That's right. I was sitting here. Well, it's funny you said that you're like first squadron. I'm like, okay, let's think about 32. Well, who am I missing?
Yeah.
That was before
we lost
my
Biff
time.
and Moon. Then I show up at VF-101. We lost Lurch. Logan Allen, you probably remember him.
I do. I remember that. I wasn't there for that one.
And then when I was in VF2, we lost Ernie and Stench.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah.
That's right.
Cheers to those guys.
Yeah. Cheers. Amen to that.
Yeah. I think we all lost a lot of airplanes, but I never lost any people. Not my squadron, at least. I lost a lot of friends, but they were never in my squadron when it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to shift gears?
All right. Yeah, let's shift gears. Let's talk about something more fun. Might need to switch to the hard stuff if we keep this conversation going.
So how long did you guys have to keep up your readiness reporting, and what I'm thinking of? I mean, I don't really care the month, but I'm thinking about as the final flight approaches and the squadron's getting ready to shut down, when did they say, okay, you can stop flying operational training and
basically by end of July we were done, because at that point we were down to 8 jets, and in like August 1 we were flying 2 more away. So the last month August, September, we only had 4 planes. So
that's like 6 weeks prior. Okay. So you've transferred probably a lot of have you started to transfer your air crews and your maintainers? Your enlisted guys?
It was I kept on to the guys I could. It was hard because obviously we're getting rid of all our Rios. And so I'm losing half of my ready room. As a matter of fact, I remember having my first, after the transition, we'd gone through the RAG. I'm fast forwarding here, a little out of order, but the following year we were a VFA squadron, and we have an AOM, and I am yelling at one of my JOs, who's the duty officer, one of my favorite guys, Rip Gordon, Drama. And I'm like, Drama, where the hell is everybody? He's like, Skipper, this is everybody. And I had 1 department head, and I had 6 guys. I had 7 people in my ready room that were, pilots. And I'm like, all right, screw it. Let's just go to the club. We're done. Great AOM. We're out of here. So as you remember, the fun and camaraderie of a F-14 ready room, where you have 25 to 35 different guys, personalities, all bigger than the next. To go from that to my wives' club, my wife, the XO's wife, and one of the department heads. 3 wives. That was the wife's club. Yeah. So, I mean, it was becoming a Hornet guy was not easy. There were a lot of growing pains.
Amazing.
Yeah. Especially, going to a single seat squadron with all, what you're used to that was.
So that's so true. Cause every time you pull into port, we as Tomcat guys, we'd show up, you get a couple of hotel rooms, call it the admin. You'd show up, you'd bring your own party. You're like, hey, we're here. Next thing you know, there's a potted plant going out the window. Who knew, right?
Yeah.
And
nobody needed that.
No, nobody needed it. Yeah. And But on the Hornet guys, I mean, you'd show up at their admins and you'd be like, wow, there's nobody here. No, that's like you said, it's everybody not on duty.
Everybody.
Like,
Yeah, that's 2/3 of the red room.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
Okay. Can I tell one quick story before we get back to?
Please.
When you talk about the potted plant going out the window, it reminded me of something we did on my first deployment in Waikiki. One of my buddies and I were sitting there, and somebody had bought a lighter, and we had lighter fluid, and we were trying to figure out how far down the lighter fluid would stay lit. So we put a pool of lighter fluid on the balcony.
What could possibly go wrong?
Put a pool of lighter fluid on the balcony, made it go over the edge, and lit it on fire. And we're watching the fire. So then we look down on the street and we see people, and they're counting what floor this mayhem is coming from. Well, it was like 30 seconds later. Hey, what do you got?
I don't know what you're talking about. These aren't the droids you're looking for.
They did not kick us out that time.
Oh, that time.
Okay. So what were some of so you talked about some of the transition issues going from Tomcats to Hornets. What about, the last few months in Tomcat land, in the world of Tomcats? Were there any surprises? Any surprises that were, negative? And then we'll get into all the happiness coming up soon. But
the negative part was losing touch with my troops, because we had to start farming our kids out to they were doing OJT basically. So, my ADs were going off to another mech shop on the Hornet side, learning how to fix the little motors. And I say that but little motor. And, my ATs were learning how not to run wires. It's like, they're way overqualified. So it was sad, because I'd go down and my troops were not there, and my senior enlisted, some of them were there, but I lost, they were off looking after the kids too. At one point I probably had 30 troops that were still in the VF-31 spaces, as they're learning how to fix Super Hornets. So that transition part started to get pretty hard, because it didn't feel very squadron-esque, if that was a word.
And yet every time you get in a jet, you could still get killed.
That's it. And that's what I explained to these guys. I'm like, listen, boys, we can't lose focus, especially because now we weren't staying lethal. We were just sport flying. So it was, I did the home run derby, the baseball all-star game home run derby flyover in my hometown in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Nice.
Which was a ton of fun. And I thought I was going to get in trouble for it, but we didn't. But that was the sort of thing, like basically every air show, Fort Lauderdale, you name it, everyone wanted to with the F-14 for the last time. And so these 6 to 4 to 2 jets were everywhere. And as you mentioned, Bio, you can certainly die in a flyby just as easily as you can anywhere else. And so I was like, guys, let's not. And I explained to them, I go, a lot of the legacy of the F-14 is on your shoulders now. I go, let's not mar what has been a remarkable history of I think the most iconic fighter the Navy's ever had, by screwing it up at this point. I go, let's finish strong and be smart. And so, to their credit, the guys took that message on board and executed appropriately.
That's I tell you what, it's really good advice, because you think about that. That's not the type of thing you think about a lot. Is, hey, this, just because I'm sport flying, it's just as bad as combat. We probably lose more people in training than we do in combat, and I know we do.
Yeah.
It's so easy to imagine that could happen, especially as you're in that sundown and you're thinking about, hey, I need to send this airplane to the desert, or I'm sending this airplane to a museum in my hometown with a 4,000-foot runway. And maybe you lose sight of that. And part of that is, that whole time you've got all these people like trying to get your attention. They're trying to get into your squadron and interrupt you and say, hey, and now we need this fly off ceremony. Right. So talk us through. We had, there was that event. I think we were probably all there at Oceana where we flew off that last airplane. Tell us what happened on that last one.
It was a bittersweet day for a lot of reasons. One was that the powers that be had decided that they were going to make the F-14 that did the last flight, the ceremonial last flight. We're talking about the Sunset, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Was going to have a generic paint scheme. So it didn't have VF-31 colors on it. It had a Tomcat patch and some Grumman stuff on it, which didn't sit well with the squadron, but it really didn't sit well with my maintainers, as you can imagine. They were fiercely proud. We had won the Battle E. We'd won the Clifton. We had won the Arleigh Burke Award. We'd won the Golden Wrench. We had, and Twig, in true Twig fashion, had all of those painted on our tails. So our tails looked like they were busy. I mean, we had a lot of awards, and
there's a garage sale on that.
Yeah,
too.
It was like, what didn't they, we even we won the Blue M, and he insisted on putting the Blue M for medical readiness on the tail. I almost lost my mind when he did that. I'm like, really?
I remember that.
Dude. Yeah. I'm like, the Blue M? Seriously?
Yeah, sister
has
squad,
nothing to do with
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, that's not fighter aviation. But anyway, so these generic paint schemes are scheduled to do the last flight. And unbeknownst to me, my maintainers, God bless them, had given me culpable deniability. They have the sunset, everyone's there, the mayor, Meyer Obador, admirals are there, and the last F-14 is going to go take off and do the ceremonial last flight. Well, somewhere between the taxi and the hold short, that plane broke. And behold, the spare was up and ready and full VF-31 regalia. So, yeah. Plane that took off with the generic Grumman and Tomcat logos was sitting there at the hold short when the VF-31 plane took off for the last sunset flight. And I'm not sure a lot of people noticed, but I do know that my troops noticed, which is really all I cared about. They were fiercely proud of that fact and very happy about it. And then my MMCO, who's one of my best friends and I think the greatest maintainer that ever fixed an F-14, came up to me and then he filled me in on it. He gave me the backfill. And he's like, Skipper, this is what we did. I go, Wrench. That's what his call sign was, Wrench, appropriately. He could fix anything. I'm like, Wrench, thank you. That was awesome.
Well, I was sitting in the stands and we all noticed that it was a different airplane and it was a 31 airplane. So,
and of course I'm sure there were some snide comments. I'm like, it's natural they have a spare and that the Tomcat broke. Meanwhile, I can tell you, those were the best planes you'd ever flown. Everything on both of those jets worked perfectly.
Oh, very cool. Great story. That's one. Yeah. Crunch. That's another one that's going to get.
Yeah, that's right. That is
revelation.
That is.
Yeah, I'm like, what's the statute of limitations on some of these things? I should probably.
I don't know. Well,
everyone in the story is retired, so.
Yeah, that's right. What are they going to do?
Right.
But hey, so that wasn't the actual last flight, though. That was the ceremonial last flight. Right.
Yeah.
And so Bio went into Wikipedia and he found the source of all knowledge that he found this statement. It says the last F-14 flight occurred on October 4th, 2006 as BNO 164603 flew from NAS Oceana to Republic Airport. Does that sound familiar? Is that what you were
all accurate? Wikipedia is actually spot on that.
Wow.
Yeah. Bio, you hit the nail on the head.
Well, somebody put that on there. I don't know who did that, but
yeah.
And apparently that aircraft is now on static display outside of the former Grumman Aerospace Corporation headquarters in Bethpage, New York, where it all started.
You know what? And that might be the one that was recently moved to Cradle of Aviation. I don't keep track of all that.
It was. And actually, Crunch, can you pause it for a sec?
Pause the recording?
Yeah, can you stop for a sec? Because I actually have to get something. I forgot. There's something I want to show you guys. Okay, just go get it. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Give me 20 seconds.
Okay. Take your time.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to tell us something he didn't want recorded.
No.
Everybody reloaded, almost everybody. But also, when we took that break to get some stuff, I grabbed my flight gear bag off the shelf behind me. And listen to this. I mean, it's still full of pubs.
Yep.
IFR
still current.
From
you have an IFR in there?
1998.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then right in the outside pocket, easy to get to, is a piddle pack.
Ready to go.
That's it.
With the directions. Don't forget that yellow piece of paper. Those are the directions in case you're learning impaired.
That's all.
I always thought that was funny.
Fuck, you have to get something. So
I did.
I don't want to anchor on piddle packs. So
Okay, yeah, good point. So, yeah, on October 4th, for reasons that go beyond the podcast, I was not flying the last flight, and we can talk about that offline sometime. But the guys that flew the last flight were Chris Richard and Fitz Gentry, two of my department heads. Great guys, and I selected them because I thought they were appropriate. And again, bittersweet. I didn't get to do it, but what they did is, so they flew up to Republic, and obviously there was a big crowd waiting. They were very excited. The people up there, we had been up, I'm trying to look, I've got something on my wall from the event. They'd had a big event. We'd brought two F-14s up to Republic about 2 months earlier for a Grumman Celebration, and there were probably 15,000 people waiting for us to land.
Oh, I believe it.
To see the F-14. And the president of Grumman was there, and I didn't know any of this. I was like, whoa. So we ended up going to this event for 2 days, and we were treated like royalty. It was a really special event. And I had an appreciation for Grumman, the history of Grumman fighters and naval aviation in particular, and, the pride that the people in Bethpage had. But I got an even deeper appreciation. Those people up there really put their hearts and souls. The Grumman Iron Works was a real thing. It was a living, breathing organization, and they were just so fiercely proud of that plane, as they deserved to be. And when it came back, they were very emotional about the whole thing, and that emotion fed onto the aircrew. But a couple months later, we're back to bring the absolute last plane, and that 164-603. I remember it like it was yesterday. Was one of our best jets. That thing was a horse. Every system on that thing, and again, I told you, all the planes were great, but this one was even better than most. And my boys, since I didn't get to do the flight, I don't know if you can read that, but it says it's Wild Turkey Rare Breed, which is my favorite bourbon. And it says this bottle was flown on the last F-14 compact flight, 4 October 2006.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I broke it open for my Rios. When Randy Stearns took command of 211, I opened that up. But it was a lot of the guys had driven up. My maintainers drove up. We Fighter Wing, Strike Fighter Wing at this point, had given us funding to, we took up about 15 people in a couple vans and received the aircraft. Yeah, it was really an emotional day. I mean, as we shut it down, and I don't know how familiar you are with demilling the planes, but like the last thing that they do is they're shutting down the engines is they have to pull both fire bottles. So you pull the fire handles and you blow the bottles down the engines so that, this plane can never be flown again. Like we delivered one down to Florida to Snort, and everyone was like, make sure you blow those bottles or Snort will be in that plane tomorrow doing supersonic flybys in Miami. We were like, you got it. So we were very careful. God rest his soul. But so we, you hear the engines wind down, then you hear them pull the fuel shut-off handles and the engines choke, and then you hear the bottles go down. And it's like pulling something off life support. You're just, this is the last time you're going to hear GE-110s roar in an F-14. And this is the last time that this plane will ever, be operational. And, I'm not ashamed to admit I cried. It was, I didn't bawl, but, there was a tear. It was hard. It was hard to watch that plane get shut down for the final time and not realize what it had meant in my life, what the plane, the people that had fixed it, the people that I flew with, the people that had passed flying it. It had just been such a significant part of my life. And then to see that chapter of it just come to an end the way it did, it was a very emotional moment. But, it couldn't be in a better spot. The Grumman people, they took it, and then we went up a couple months later they had dedicated it. And, they had a really nice monument out front, and they it was right in front of the Grumman Iron Works where it was built. which was absolutely appropriate. And unfortunately, Bio, as you'd mentioned kind of offline, yeah, the Grumman has sold that facility to who knows what, probably some .com. But it is now the cradle of aviation in Bethpage. Bill Bardo, who's an old Grumman employee, great friend of mine, great guy. He was just an instrumental individual in getting all of this set up. He messaged me the other day and told me that, hey, they've got the plane, they're taking care of it, which was good because Grumman, as they shrunk and they hadn't done anything to that plane.
Yeah, they couldn't.
Yeah, and they couldn't, and you're right. But now it's in the place that it belongs, and it's being treated the way it should be.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So when that was done, when did you like sign your last disestablishment of VF-31 or whatever?
That was it. Yeah, we signed that flight schedule. When I signed that flight schedule and we came back,
did you have to send a message, a naval message, or anything like that?
Send a message, but I'm sorry. I'm not entirely sure because we got reflagged VFA 31.
Oh shit! Okay, sorry.
Yeah. But I don't remember what that precise date was because I don't think that happened until we were safe for flight. So I thought we had to go through the RAG. And Crunch, maybe you remember this in 2013.
I don't remember, but I remember safe for flight being a really big deal and taking a lot longer than I thought it was going to.
Yeah, I
think you might be right that's when you became VFA.
Yeah.
Okay. I was overthinking it. I forgot they converted to VFA. Okay.
Yeah. We went. I was in the RAG. I was in VFA 106 a month later. Going through CBTs again. And, nothing like being an 05 going through the RAG. But
it's a slightly different experience.
It is a slightly different experience. Like that time won't work for me. Noon's better. I'll see you at noon. Yeah. But it was a bittersweet thing. And then, as I mentioned, I was able to keep some of my Rios in VF 31 as we went through VFA 106. So they were able to go through in my squadron until so I guess we were VF 31 still going through the RAG because I was able to keep those guys until we graduated from the RAG and become a VFA squad, designated VFA squad.
And some of those guys, if I remember, had to go out to VFA 22 out in Lemoore.
Oh yeah, I lost.
Because didn't Fitz go out there, and I think a couple other guys did too, right?
Thumbs, Tauntaun, Billy Frank.
Okay, more than I remembered.
Yeah. I mean, I'm proud to say 7 of those guys became COs. 7 of my JOs ended up being COs. So
wow, that's good.
It was a remarkable class.
That's tremendous.
Yeah, they are. And as a matter of fact, one's a skipper of VFA 122 right now. Billy Frank.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Billy's skipper of the RAG out in Lemoore.
Awesome.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was a remarkable pool of talent in the first cruise guys. They were really good dudes.
Yeah. Crunch, I'm dying to ask this.
Yeah, ask away.
Puck, do you think there will be another Navy fighter squadron sometime?
That's a loaded question.
Well, I don't know. See, I don't know how much you think about that stuff.
Oh, I think about it a lot. I mean, a lot of my friends are still, either in or consulting, contracting, and still working in, the skiff in Oceana.
Yeah.
So, we have high level.
Well, you don't have to tell us what they'll fly, but instead of a VFA, will there be another VF?
Will there be a VF? I think there needs to be, but I don't think there will be. I think between unmanned vehicles.
Yeah.
See, I think the fighter world is not prone to unmanned flight. I think that's just, I think there needs to be a man in that equation. And honestly, being a 2-seat fan, I think there needs to be 2 people, especially with the weapon systems that are out there today. As I like to say, 2 people in an F-14 could be 1.5 people, or it could be 5 people, depending on how well they got together. Like when Abdul and I flew together, we were supersonic. It was, we didn't talk. We just mind melded, and it was, like super action heroes in the plane. But if you flew, as you know, Bio, you're flying with a driver that you don't get along with, or you just, You don't communicate.
Or a Rio who's a dirtbag, whatever. Yeah.
Because, and I'll say this, as you know, the back of the ship is the great equalizer for everything. It's like, that you're going to weed out a bad driver because there's the boat, but it's very hard to weed out a bad Rio.
Yes.
Because it's like, okay, he's just not good.
Yes,
it's like, at what point do you get rid of him? And I have always found that Rios are more critical of Rios than drivers are because they recognize it. The good Rios are like, we need to get rid of this guy. That's where, all the guys that we ended up getting phenofobbed, those were all initially generated by Rios. They're like, this kid's a dirtbag. He can't operate the back seat. And as you know, an AUG-9 required some special skill to make that thing work.
Yeah. And on the front seat, almost any time you had a time where you were like, okay, we need to evaluate whether this pilot is going to remain in naval aviation or not, almost without fail, it was because something happened at the boat.
Yeah.
It was never because the rendezvous was too hot
it
was
never rendezvous or the fact you couldn't fight your way out of a wet bag. I mean, it was the boat. If you could land on a ship, you were going to be able to stay in naval aviation, which I think is unfortunate, by the way, because as one of my favorite CEOs said, our mission isn't to come back and land on the ship, guys. That's administrative work. He's like, our mission is to kill people and break shit.
When I was in VF2 and our landing grades weren't that good, our XO was a pilot, and he goes, they don't call us Landing Squadron 2.
Right. And Bio, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, the only reason I ended up I worked hard to be a good ball flyer. I mean, I wasn't a natural at it, but I ended up being was so I could make fun of it, because it's a lot easier to make fun of landing if you're in the top 10.
Yeah.
If you got a sleeve full of top 10 patches and you go, hey guys, this isn't that important, they listen to you. If you're just a plumber and you're saying this isn't that important, it's like, well, it's because you suck at it.
Yeah.
But I would say that all the time. I'm like, guys, I had a sleeve full of them. I'm like, you know what, guys, I want you to be safe. I want you to be safe, but I also want you to land on the first try. I do not need to see you doing loops around the ship as we're burning up gas and wasting time as the ship's steaming into the wind. I go, so land safely the first time. That's all I'm asking for. You throw me a bunch of fair 2 wires, I am thrilled. I mean, it's all right. So you're throwing a stitch every now and then with your okay, but I'm absolutely fine with that. What I don't need is a 75% boarding rate and some of the other crap. So
yeah,
I absolutely agree. It's like we're not a landing squadron, we're a fighter squadron, and people would lose that, especially on the driver's side. I know guys that like landing. I'm like, landing is the last thing we need to be worried about here. We have 6 hours over Iraq. Get your mind right. So
fair enough.
Comments.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So let's wrap this up. What are you doing nowadays? I know the answer, but for everybody else.
I am with a bunch of other F-14 brothers at FedEx, happily moving boxes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Flying rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong.
Really. So we got an early look at Top Gun 2. And so I'm there with Abdul and Lou Shager and all my friends.
The one down here in Virginia Beach where you went down? Yeah. Oh, I missed that because I was out of town.
So guess who's there? The CAG from Top Gun 1, this cigar smoker, the rubber dog shit.
You're kidding.
No, Bio, he was there. And he looks great, by the way. Sounds identical. Yeah. So he's there. I have a picture of sitting there with him, and we, he does a line. It's like, I go, ironically, he's like, what are you doing now? I'm like, ironically, I'm flying a cargo plane full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong. He starts laughing. And I go, and so is that guy. And so is, I look around, there's like 6 FedEx guys standing around. I'm like, this guy, that guy. And
the pay's good. So
it's and you know what? No people. It's like there isn't a service support animal in sight. It's like, it's very laid back. So that's what I'm doing. It's been great though. I'm
Sounds
very
good.
happy to be part of the company. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Man, Puck, this Crunch, I think you're right. I think we have accomplished our mission. And Puck, let me just tell you, this was great. Crunch and I were talking about it, and Crunch goes, oh yeah, Puck's got it. He's going to take us there. So this was really good. You did a great job.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for spending the time with us.
No, gentlemen, it was an honor to be on your show. I love following you, and it's nice that we have a shared passion in what I think is still the most iconic fighter in Navy history.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Puck, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And to everybody out on Tomcast world, thanks for joining us for the F-14 Tomcast. Come back in another 2 weeks. We do have one more after this one, or we're going to wrap everything up. All right. Thanks, everybody. Cool.
Thanks, fellas.
You've been listening to the F-14 Tomcast, part of the Air Combat Experience, brought to you by BVR Productions. Got a question for the show? Send an email to questions@f14tomcast.com or leave a message on our listener line at 877 Mach 101 extension 3. That's 877-622-4101 extension 3. For updates on this podcast and our other military aviation themed shows, visit bvrpro.com and follow the Air Combat Experience on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks for listening.